The deficit, $214 billion for 2021. The July economic statement had the deficit at $180 billion. So the question is, have you provided enough fiscal firepower to drive the recovery as the RBA has been calling for you to do?
We absolutely have. This budget includes a record amount of support for Australian families and Australian businesses. There are a range of different measures designed to do one thing, namely create jobs across the economy. The measures in this budget, together with what is happening across the broader economy, will help create 1 million new jobs over the next few years. What we have put in place is tax cuts for more than 11.5 million Australians. Will give them more money that they have earned, and they will be able to spend that across the economy creating jobs. We're providing business tax incentives so that investment can be undertaken by immediately deducting the purchase of a new harvester if you're a farmer, or a new van if you're a florist, or upgrading your production line if you're a manufacturer. We're allowing a loss carry-back provision so that businesses who were profitable before the crisis but are now loss-making can take it back, which they previously couldn't do, and get a refund based on previous profits and tax.
But it pales in comparison, doesn't it, to the initial effort? As I said, in July, the deficit was at $180 billion, $214 billion tonight. It's not a massive increase.
Well, again, you've got...
Are you providing the fiscal firepower that the RBA says we need in this country right now?
Well, at 11% of GDP, that deficit is at a record high.
But most of it's front-loaded, isn't it, in terms of money already spent?
Most of it is front-loaded in the next couple of years, because this is where we need to act to get people back to work. You see, during the GFC, which was dwarfed by this crisis, Kieran, in the GFC, the global economy contracted 0.1%. In this crisis, it's expected that this year the global economy will contract by a full 4.5%. But during the GFC, monetary policy was able to be used by the Reserve Bank, and they cut interest rates by a full 425 basis points, which was the equivalent of stimulating the economy over 12 months by $100 billion. That firepower was not available in this crisis. So we've used fiscal firepower, whether it's JobKeeper, JobSeeker, the $750 payments, the cash flow boost, tonight the hiring credit, the business tax incentives, the business tax, the personal income tax cuts being brought forward. This is going to create thousands of jobs.
Let's look at this, though. JobKeeper is $101 billion. This JobMaker initiative, over 2 financial years, is $54 billion. Do you accept that this is a stepping down of support?
And then again, you've got the tax cuts, and you've got the business tax incentives, and you've got all the other infrastructure projects that we're bringing forward, $14 billion.
The business tax incentives is the JobMaker, is part of that JobMaker.
Well, we've got business tax incentives where you can now go and immediately deduct the full purchase of a piece of machinery or a piece of equipment for your business.
But it's a lot less than JobMaker, isn't it? So it's a stepping down, a tapering.
No, the tax cuts for businesses are significantly generous, and as a result will spur investment, which will make us a more productive nation. But you shouldn't see any of these programs in isolation. JobKeeper has been a remarkable success. It's now supporting more than 3.5 million Australians at $101 billion. Its price tag has been at a record.
Yeah, the emergency measures have received a lot of praise, including from the opposition, from us, from basically everyone. But this budget, is it a wasted opportunity in terms of reform? Where's the significant reform?
So in this budget, we've made the most significant reforms to insolvency laws in 30 years. The most significant reforms to the provision of credit in 10 years. The most significant energy reforms designed to get more gas out of the ground and spur our manufacturing strategy. We're making investments in research and development. We're obviously backing apprentices. There's significant skills reform. What we're seeking to do in the industrial relations space is to get a breakthrough between employers and employees so that we can create more jobs and more flexible labour markets. There's plenty of reform in this budget, but it is also dealing with the here and now, because, Kieran, is
this the path of least resistance? Because you didn't push the stage 3 tax cuts, you didn't bring them forward. Why didn't you bring them forward?
Because stage 2 being forward by 2 years and then adding the additional low and middle income tax offset for an extra year is what the economy needs today. We will maintain a watching brief, but these measures in this budget go a long way to supporting the Australian recovery.
Budget papers reveal the early introduction of a vaccine by 6 months would add 1.5% in GDP growth, in annual GDP growth.
About $34 billion they talk about.
If it's 6 months late, does it wipe 1.5% of GDP off?
Well, again, it will have a significant impact on the bottom line.
So if it's a year late, it wipes 3% of GDP off?
Well, again, it will depend on the circumstances at the time. We'll continue to update our forecasts at every major
yes.
statement.
Is that a yes?
Well, we'll update our numbers in my EFO. We'll update our numbers in next May's budget. But right now, we have predicated some of the assumptions in this budget on a vaccine being available across the country by the end of next year. And as you know, we've put ourselves in the best possible position, whether it was the global supply chains or whether it's with researchers here in Australia, to secure that vaccine. We've also made assumptions and scenario analysis about what could happen if there was another wave of cases in Victoria. That could hurt the national economy by $55 billion. So I just underscore for you, Kieran, this is the most uncertain economic environment any Australian government has ever had to deal with.
The JobMaker hiring credit, $200 for those under 30,
16 to 29.
and then from 16 to 29. Those under 35 get a $100 JobMaker hiring credit. Have you put in any protection to ensure businesses don't, say, sack a 55-year-old to hire a 25-year-old?
Yes, there's a double-barrel integrity test, if you like. The employer has to add this person to their headcount and also has to add this person to their payroll. And so that will ensure that this new hire of someone off job seeker into their business will add to the general employment levels.
Finally, in your maiden speech 10 years ago, you said you wanted politicians to dream large but limit the government, which you argued was too big then. It's a very different world today, isn't it?
Well, what we've sought to do here is unleash opportunities in the private sector to lead the recovery. And I'm speaking specifically about the investments, incentives that we've put in place for business, the loss carryback, the measures designed to put more money into people's pockets through tax cuts. Lower taxes means smaller government, not bigger government.
This is pretty big government, though, this budget, isn't it?
At the end of the day, we're dealing with unprecedented circumstances. We had no alternative but to act in the way we have. And in the budget papers, they point out that but for the supportive measures that we've announced in this budget, the unemployment rate would tick up to 12% this year and next. So, Kieran, what we've done has already saved 700,000 jobs. What we're doing with tonight's economic blueprint for the recovery is saving hundreds of thousands of more jobs.
And what would you have thought as a young bloke 10 years ago if you saw tonight's budget? Obviously, as you say, they're unusual, unprecedented times, but you've had to go deep into the locker to find some of these measures, haven't you?
I thought it was pretty tough over summer with the ongoing drought, the devastating floods, and obviously the bushfires. And then we were hit by COVID-19. But whatever I've thought about it and whatever my personal circumstances have been, it's nothing, Kieran, compared to those Australians who are at home, who either lost their job, lost a loved one, and gone through some pretty challenging times.
We appreciate your time, as always, a big day.
Always good to be with you.
Thank you, Treasurer.